This shot you're looking at right now is my most used focal length of all time because I'm a content creator, tube doucher who shills random gear from China for 2.5% commission. That's what I do. But aside from that, I am a professional filmmaker, videographer. Although I have a lot of client work, I do way more YouTube videos, and I'm always using the 24mm focal length for these talking heads. My most used 24mm lens has been the 24mm GM. GM stands for Got Money because Sony GM lenses are known to be expensive, high quality. It has all the weather sealing, the newest autofocus motors, and of course the Sony branding. And you'll see a lot of Sony D-bag fanboys out there that pretty much look down on any other brand lens and will always tell you Sony GM lenses is the way to go. And for the most part, if you're a professional photographer, videographer that demands high speed everything, especially for sports, if you're going to be filming a football game, baseball game, or doing photos for that kind of stuff, sure, highly recommend the GM lenses because GM lenses takes full advantage of burst shooting, such as the A9 Mark III, the Sony A1 II, but that's such like a small group of individuals that really need that. And sometimes people prefer other types of looks that other lenses give them, a little bit less clinical, a little bit more character, things of that nature. The lens I'm currently using to film is the Sony 16 to 25 G lens. It's f2.8, and the reason why I'm not using my 24 right now is because it broke. It is dead. I've had it since 2018. So 6 years of service, autofocus is dead. Basically one day I was filming a YouTube video, and usually with my YouTube videos, I could always trust the Sony autofocus to grab onto my face, no problem. So I assumed that's what it was doing. When I went into the edit, I realized I was completely out of focus. So I was like, oh crap, I guess tomorrow I'm gonna have to reshoot this. The next day I was setting up and I realized that the lens wasn't focusing. I tested it on all of my Sony bodies and yep, it's gone. 3 days later, 7Artisans reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to review their new 24mm f1.8 autofocusing lens. And I'll be honest with you, I usually say no to reviewing a lot of these budget lenses because it's boring, it's tough to make a video about. But I was like, hey, maybe there's a sign from God because my most used lens, 24 f1.4 GM, is dead. So here is the 7Artisans 24mm f1.8 lens. Typical of any lens, it has lens hood, caps top and bottom. It's well made, a mixture of plastic and metal. It has an AF MF switch, a custom button, and it has a manual aperture, a smooth aperture ring that clicks when you go into auto. It's not the strongest click, but it's good enough, I guess, and a manual focus ring that I'll not use. It is not weather sealed, but it's also $1,000 cheaper than the 24 f1.4, and it's like a stop slower at f1.8 instead of f1.4. And you may ask me, why would I not just use an f2.8 like I'm using right now? A lot of times I am filming these YouTube videos in my office and I don't get to, and because of the way my office is set up, I don't have that much depth behind me. So I could easily use an f2.8 in a situation like this where I have a lot of depth back there through my windows into my backyard. In my office, with an f2.8, I feel like I don't get enough separation from me and the wall behind me. So to alleviate that, I use a faster aperture to obviously get more YouTube D-bag bokeh behind me, separating me from my wall. Long story short, I highly recommend the 7Artisans 24mm f1.8 lens if you're looking into a 24mm f1.8 prime. I'm gonna explain to you why, but before I do that, I'm gonna actually just switch this Sony 16 to 25 f2.8 lens for the 7Artisans 24 f1.8 so you could see what the 24mm f1.8 looks like, and hopefully you could also see the difference between this bokeh and this bokeh. And of course, immediately you're going to notice that this lens is a lot brighter than the previous lens because it's an f1.8 versus 2.8. So let me go ahead and use my variable ND to stop down my desired exposure. Biggest challenge in filming in like a natural light environment like this is the constant change in light intensity outside the windows. That's why I'm currently using an artificial light to provide me with a key light, so at least I am consistent as the background keeps changing exposure. And I'm gonna leave my white balance and all that as is, so you're gonna see the slight changes in color between the Sony G lens and the 7Artisans 24mm f1.8. So why do I like using 24mm in the first place for talking head YouTube debag trash videos for me to shill random Chinese gear? It is because it is, one, very close to my camera. So if I need to make adjustments, I could just reach over and make adjustments. I could also see the tiny ass trash Sony monitor, because we all know Sony, although they make great TVs, they even have cell phones with 4K screens, and on their Sony cameras, they completely give it the worst of the worst screens on the planet. I don't even care if it's an A7R5, those screens just are not up to par when you look at Canon or Panasonic screens for some reason. So hopefully one day Sony will get its act together and stop giving us Temu ass LCDs on the cameras. The other thing I like about 24mm is because for social media and content creation, it is a very familiar focal length, because all cell phones, the best camera on the cell phone is what? It's a 24mm. So it's very familiar. It's a very familiar focal length to everybody. It's something they're used to seeing. It is something they often shoot with themselves from their cell phone. That's why I use it. I know a lot of content creator D-bags out there is going to recommend you use a 16mm. The main thing is because when they're vlogging, they're holding the camera out, and sometimes 24mm. So right now I'm holding my arm out like this. I can't, I have to, like, if I was going to be vlogging with the 24mm holding this lens, I'll be this close to the camera. So with a 16mm, they could be a little more relaxed and still have their face and more of the background to be seen in the shot. However, I don't know how many of you are walking around vlogging and holding your camera out. I don't. The only thing I use 16mm for is real estate or doing like ultra wide epic room reveal for like a wedding video. But other than that, my go-to wide angle lens is 98% of the time a 24mm. And as you can see with the 7Artisans, I've been moving back and forth and it's focusing with me perfectly fine. And look, although 7Artisans sent me this lens, if it was trash, I would have sent it back, or I would not even do this video. I would not recommend anything on my channel unless I thought it's good and that I'm gonna use it, okay? This lens has proven itself to me to the point where I'm not gonna even bother getting my 24GM repaired. Maybe one day I will, but right now, I'm gonna just film all of my YouTube videos from here on out with this 24mm 7Artisans lens. And yeah, it's not weather sealed and all that stuff, but I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm not gonna be going out and filming any YouTube videos while it's raining outside. And again, I'm the biggest Sony GM got money lens douchebag on the planet. I have owned and still own many GM lenses, even as expensive as a $3,000 28-70 f2 got money lens. And not gonna lie, if it's raining outside, I'm not gonna even be filming at all or doing anything outside with my cameras. I know it's weather sealed, but I don't trust it like that. So for the vast majority of you, if you're not going out there shooting like, high speed sports, you're not gonna need weather sealing. I'm not the most technical reviewer. I review based on practicality, how I use things. And from my use of this lens the past 3 weeks to a month, it's been solid as shit. So I'm coming with you at that recommendation. If for some reason I dropped this lens on the floor and it broke, and knowing that I have a 24GM f1.4 right here, and knowing how this lens operates, would I actually buy this lens with my own money to replace it? Yes, I would. The absolute hardest thing to test for any lens is filming kids. And my son, like myself, has ASD level 1. You don't know what that is. It's autism spectrum disorder, and ADHD, likely. So do I. So he's gonna be running around all crazy, very unpredictable. And this lens autofocus kept up with him, no issues. A common theme I always see with Chinese lenses is it struggles to take continuous autofocus burst shooting in photography. I've seen it with Viltox lenses. I've seen it with Suri lenses. For some reason, the 7Artisans 24mm f1.8 here seems to track autofocus continuously in burst photography shooting completely fine. And this is actually in a slower Sony ZV-1, which is not nearly as good as an A7 IV for photography. You know, it's really unfortunate that my 24 G Master is dead and I can't compare, you know, shot for shot with the 24 GM. But just from my experience, and you're going to just have to trust me on this one, that editing the 24mm f1.8 footage compared to the hundreds and hundreds of videos I've edited with the 24mm GM, I don't really feel like I'm losing anything. Maybe I'm losing that f1.4 bokeh, but to be honest with you, this is plenty of bokeh for a shot like this. In my opinion, it looks fantastic. I've also shown the Samyang Rokinen 24mm autofocusing lens, and I've also tried out the Viltox 24mm f1.8 autofocusing lens, and I can't compare that with them either. Just from my memory from using those lenses, this lens seems to have a lot less distortion just from looking at how straight lines are, especially here on this shot. All the lines on my windows vertically seems like they're straight, versus I do remember the Samyang being a little bit more distorted, especially compared to the 24mm f1.4 G Master lens, which is known for being very good in the distortion department. It has more lens elements than pretty much any other 24mm, the Sony, compared to the Sony G Master f1.4, Samyang, Viltox, and I think if I could pull up Sigmas, I will. It has the most lens elements and everything, and it explains a lot because the 7Artisans 24 f1.8 is probably the biggest f1.8 24 and maybe the heaviest out of all the ones on the market. And if I compare the sizes between the 24 f1.4, between the 7Artisans 24 f1.8 versus the GM 1.4, they're like roughly the same size. So if you have like a 24, if you have like a 24mm f1.4, a 24 to 16 to 25G, they're all like roughly the same size. That's something to keep in mind. And I personally don't have an issue with it being slightly larger than like a 24 f1.8 Samyang or something like that. And I think it's like $100 cheaper. I'm gonna have to check my sources on that. My only gripe about this lens is its filter thread. It's a 62mm filter thread, which for me is odd because I own mostly 67 and 82. So that's the only thing that, drives me a little nuts, but this is obviously a personal preference thing. If you're one of those dudes that bought a 28 to 45 Sigma f1.8 lens, or in my case, freaking 28 to 70 GM stands for Got Money f2 lens, and you need a 24mm to pair up with it because obviously you stop at 28, and sometimes on a shoot, you might need a 24mm for $329. Now you have the 24mm, plus you got your 20 to 70 f2, and you're good as gold, and you're good to go. And for me, on shoots, I rarely use the 24mm. And the only time I do use it is for like a wedding venue reveal or something like that. So I can just whip out this 24mm real quick, get that shot, go along with my day. Unless you're planning on filming or taking photographs in the rain, the GM f1.4 is kind of a waste of money. You just go for this 7Artisans f1.8, $330. I highly recommend it. The lens is solid. I mean, I can't really say anything more about it. It may or may not do me a lot of good if I sat there and just said, hey, buy Sony, this Sony lens, Sony. And there's gonna be some creators you'll see that always pushing Sony lenses, and you won't see them review like these cheaper random Chinese brands, type of lenses. And I'm telling you, man, like, not everyone is professional, doing all this sports. Most people, hobbyists, social media, content creators, regular ass people out there, you don't need to buy expensive ass lenses. And, it's not going to, being crazy loyal to Sony is not going to get me, hasn't got me anything, right? Been shooting Sony since 2014. Have you seen me review any Sony camera or lens pre-launch? No. So last year, got invited to Sony Condo at the skin of my teeth. Probably not invited again. Who knows, right? So the only brand that you should have 100% loyalty to is you. You're a content creator, social media D-bag, YouTube douchebag trash that chills for 2.5% commission on random goods from Temu, from Amazon, from China. Be loyal to your brand. Because you sit there and put loyalty towards these other brands out there, they don't care, you know? If you don't work out, they'll just go to the next content creator. If let's say you made a mistake or something like that, got into some controversy, said some wild stuff by accident, misspoke online, they'll quickly abandon you. They'll quickly cancel you and just push you aside. Be loyal to your brand, and outside of the brand, I'm just loyal to Christ and my family. That's it. If you liked the video, you found it insightful, informative, helped you make a purchase decision, please like the video, subscribe. Until next time, lighten up. Hey man, what lens is that? I'm working on a review for this 7Artisans 24mm f1.8 lens for Sony E-mount. Oh my god, Sony it rat. You need to switch to Lumit f1 Mark II right away. Bro, I'm not about to switch to a different camera system for perceived upgrades that I'm actually not going to make use of. Lumit have open gay. I might make use of that once a year. It have the best IBIS. Sony IBIS in the A7S III and FX3 is actually very underrated, and the newer cameras, the IBIS is vastly improved. It do 6K. This video right now playing on everyone's phones is 720p. It will have R-Log C, much more cinematic. S-Log 3 is also used in cinema, so it have better dynamic range. That dynamic range is quite nice, but even that is not enough for me to sell 4 of my Sony camera bodies, over 20 lenses, for the next 2 months dealing with lowballers on Marketplace just to switch to a different camera system. And then a month later, some new camera comes out with 8K, 120 frames per second, freaking 69 stops of dynamic range, iBig, in-body image gimbalization. And then what am I gonna do? Switch again? I'm not sponsored by Storyblocks, Squarespace, Artlist. Ain't no one got money to be on gas like that. What you mean, that? Gear acquisition syndrome. You don't need to sell all that, you just buy. What are you talking about? Let me show you. Use the paybook at B&S. Asian love this because you don't have to pay tax. My guy, it sounds like you have a different kind of gas. Sign up for my how to switch camera master. Bro, my bad, you don't got gas, you got straight liquid coming out of your ass.